going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of your favorite swimbait podcast, Scales and Tails, episode 150. 150 is a very crazy number to be saying out loud, and I appreciate for you guys getting us here to episode 150. So we've got another bait maker down there in Texas. I'm not going to say what part because I'm 90% sure, but I will let him elaborate on that, on all that stuff. You guys may be familiar with seeing his pages. A couple guys we've had on the podcast and a couple other guys have been catching a lot of fish on his baits as of lately. So we're gonna get to hear the backstory behind Outside Lure Co. Outside the Box _ Lure Co. on Instagram. Mr. Trevor. We'll have him talk about the backstory. Obviously, the inaugural how he got into fishing, swim bait fishing, and also kind of talk about the bait building. We're going to focus on the bait building and kind of where he's at right now and in this whole fiasco of starting up a bait building business. So Trevor, I guess introduce yourself, and then obviously we have to figure out how you got to where you're at today, and that always starts with how you got into fishing, man. So yeah, tell us a little about yourself, and we'll get going tonight.
Hi, everybody. My name is Trevor Shotvet. I own a brand new lure company called Outside the Box Lure Co. And I've been making lures for a long time, but always as a hobby or as a um, just to like give out to buddies or whatever. But recently, my dad, I worked in construction with my dad. Recently, he was injured, and so my hobby became my bread making, my bill paying job. So
Yeah.
recently I have had to dive into it, and it's really exciting to see where it's gone in such a short time. So
That's awesome, dude. So it's kind of like this all happened stemmed from something not so great, but it's starting to be like a pretty cool experience on where you've gotten to take this journey already.
yes, and it really has gone exactly where I always wanted it to go. I was just always um, having to go work. So
Right.
now that I was forced to really bite the bullet and make this happen, it's really given me the push that I needed.
Right. It's kind of like that thing, everybody always says that cliche thing of just go do it, You just got to
Mhm.
take that leap of faith and just do it if that's something you really want to do, or if it's something that you can see yourself doing, or whatever it may be, you just have to do it. And obviously that you just did it, and it's kind of working out. You're where you're at now, and like you said, you're kind of taking it day by day, and you're slowly growing, and that's kind of all you can do really when you first start off, or even you've been doing something for X amount of years, you can just come back the next day and do it a little bit better.
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's what it's all about, and I still have a long ways to go, but definitely in it for the long haul. I've never wanted to do anything else, and that's been pretty obvious through different job choices or whatever in my life.
Yeah.
I just slowly die every day at a working for, like I used to have a job working for the city, and
Mm.
it was just every day I was just like, because I thrive off of creating
Yep.
or that artistic side. So
Heck yeah, dude. So I guess you'd already mentioned that you've been making baits for a long time. So obviously you didn't recently just get into fishing, or whatever it may be. So I guess when did that whole thing start for you prior to the bait building? When did you kind of catch your first fish or use your first bait? I guess is probably a better terminology for how this episode is going to go.
yeah, so I grew up in Northern California, which, as many would know, is kind of, you could say, or maybe Southern California too, but kind of the origin for swim bait fishing with the trout stocking and all that. So, seeing videos of swim bait fishing on YouTube and stuff in the early days, and then realizing, oh, that's at Clear Lake, that's at Berryessa, that's at Folsom, that's at um, all the lakes that are right around my house. So that was kind of eye opening. And then I was very quickly being an artist and having a carpentry background from my grandpa and my dad was very quickly like, I can do that. I could make that. And obviously you run into that. These lures are $200, $300, and you're like, okay, I want to throw a trout glide, but I gotta I got to find a way to make it myself. So that was kind of what opened my eyes to the swim bait fishing thing. And I'm not like a hardcore swim bait fisherman, like swim bait or die, like I'll go catch bluegill. Like
Yeah.
I just love fishing in general. I love being outside, love the water. So um I'm really the only one that fishes in my family. Um and it was kind of just something I latched onto. It's kind of all I've ever wanted to do. And just kind of went from there.
That's awesome, dude. So around what was the year period that you had kind of started to learn about the fishing that you had had essentially like down the road from you or kind of in your backyard?
Probably like 2012.
Okay.
And I was looking at my pictures the other night, and I think my first swim bait I made was like 2014. So I would have been like 14, 15 years old
Okay.
when I first started
Right.
making
Okay.
stuff.
Dang. So you were a little too young to like be like around Dixon Lake when all those big fish were getting caught in like 2004, 2005 type stuff, right?
Yeah, I'm only 25,
Okay.
despite
Okay.
despite looking like a 35-year-old. I get
Okay,
that a
well that
lot.
makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, because I like growing up
But
around that time would be absolutely crazy. I mean, even growing up like the time you did out there, there were still really big fish being caught, and that's kind of when
oh yeah,
that time, that 2012, 2014, like that's when the swim bait stuff was starting to come from behind closed doors, and kind of everybody was starting to hear about it, and it just kind of spread across the country around that time, if not a little bit before, which is super awesome. Your favorite swimbait podcast is now proudly sponsored by Leviathan Rods. Leviathan Rods is a Texas-based fishing rod company that's handcrafted and uses high-end, made-in-the-USA rod blankets. Every sale from Leviathan helps support foster youth and their families. With Leviathan Rods, you're not only going to feel a difference, but you're going to help make a difference too. Friends of the show will also get 20% off their rod purchases by using code SCALES20 at checkout. So whether you're fishing a depth 250 or a square bill, make sure you're using the best rod choice out there, Leviathan Rods. I've got 3 words for you. Lake Pro Tackle. Lake Pro Tackle has all the gear you need to be ready to have a successful day on the water. Friends of the podcast receive 10% off your orders while using code SCALES at checkout. Checking out with code SCALES not only saves you guys some money, but it also helps me host more giveaways to give back to you guys, the listeners. On their website, you can find exclusive and rare swim baits, JDM and BFS products, and of course, conventional tackle. I can't forget to mention Lake Pro Tackle gets the monthly throwback shop colors at the beginning of every month. Also, orders over $50 get free shipping, including rods. So do me a favor and remember to use code SCALES at checkout to save 10% at lakeprotackle.com. The vast majority of double-digit bass caught in Mexico are caught out of 2 lakes, Lake Bacharach and Lake El Salto. Josh Daniels Pro Bass Adventures is the only outfitter in Mexico with lodges on both of these trophy lakes. With a fleet of Ranger boats at Lake El Salto and Live Scope Plus at Lake Bacharach, Pro Bass Adventures has the best equipped guides and boats in Mexico. Better call Pro Bass, 480-491-9300 or probassadventures.com. We are Mexico Fishing. Staring at that peanut butter jelly like a largemouth bass staring at a dollar store worm? Then it's time to upgrade your snackuation. Meatcrafters' line of handmade small batch pre-sliced salamis and our charcuterie make the perfect base for your weekend snackle box. Fill a Plano 3600 with an assortment of Meatcrafters' old style salami and charcuterie, and you're sure to become the boat ramp champ. Listeners of the show can use code SCALES and SLICES at checkout on meatcrafters.com to save 20% off your cart. The code can be used as many times as you want, so you'll never run out of fuel for your pursuit of giants. So the next time you reach into your fridge to load up your boat cooler, skip the fish food and grab the stack of Meatcrafters pre-sliced packs. They're guaranteed to exceed your PB.
yeah, and like I said, I grew up in California, but I moved when I was 16. So I basically got my driver's, being the only one that was fishing. I was only ever fished by myself. So I got my driver's license and moved to Texas. So I didn't do a whole lot of I didn't go fish all the legendary
Okay.
Clear Lakes in the Delta and all. I knew it was right there. I just missed it all. But
Right. Yeah.
moving to Texas was a good close second.
Right. Was there any reason that you would move to Texas? Like, cause the fishing or, cause whatever else it may be, if it was fishing related?
No, it was family stuff. Like we had another branch of our church is out here, and the one we were
Hmm.
out in California got smaller. So we moved out to Texas where there was more like young opportunities for peers. There was more young people here. So
Heck yeah, dude. That's awesome, man. So
yeah.
you move out to Texas, you're around that 16, 17, around that age, later teen years. Did you, I guess, look into how the fishing scene was down there, or kind of what the fishing was like in Texas, or was that more so like an after thing once you got down there? You're kind of like, oh, I wonder if the fishing down here in Texas is anything like it was back at home.
Uh, well, we used to visit like
Hmm.
a lot of the summers, so and we pond fish, and I always knew it was good. But I found out pretty quick in fishing some of the lakes and ponds around the area, but didn't really find out the true potential until a little later. But lucky enough to find a pond that kind of fed the appetite for several years. It was kind of one of those gray area ponds where probably weren't supposed to be in there, but it was city property and you could get in like, you know, you could get away with it as long as you didn't see anybody.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we ended up catching, not on the scale, but what we think like several double digits out of there. And we were like, whoa,
That's
what's
crazy.
so what happened was the pond is it's off of a like a I don't know if you have them up there, but like a toll road, like a
Oh, yeah.
tollway.
Yep.
And they had made this big overpass, but they needed dirt for it, so they just dug this big like pit
Hmm.
right next to like on the city property. They just
Yeah.
took the dirt, and it's like an acre, or it's probably bigger than an acre, several acres, 45 bank, 8 feet deep, and the whole bottom is chunk rock and grass.
Wow.
And it's adjacent to a private lake. Well, when the private lake floods,
Well, it's
everything goes, they connect.
mm,
So the private lake had flooded and like dumped a bunch of double digits, giant catfish, big crappie, gizzard shad, bluegill,
just made its own
you name
ecosystem.
it. And it was just like this perfect storm. And since then, it's dried up.
Dang.
But we remember being there, and crappie would just get chased up on the bank,
Yeah.
or like big gizzard shad. So that's when fishing with swim baits really expanded for me. I was like, I need something to catch these
Mhm.
giant fish, and I scoured the local tackle shops and ended up starting off with like some 316 Rising Suns, and got an 8-inch bull shad, just clobbered them on that thing. I caught fish on that 8-inch bull shad until one of the screw eyes broke. Like I don't even
Dang,
know how
dude.
many, and then I casted it off one day. But
Dang, that's crazy. So it was like literally the perfect storm
yeah,
that kind of got you indoctrinated to swim bait fishing and kind of, I mean,
well, like it
really
gave
just
me the
kind of like hooked you.
confidence.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Like they'll
That's
bite this stuff, and then finding PK
hmm
was something that what has really changed it recently.
yeah.
It's just a swim. It's just a swim bait lake. Like
Mhm.
it's clear. There's big fish in there. They eat shad.
Right, yeah.
Um,
Heck yeah, dude. So that was like that had that man, I can't even imagine like just the perfect storm of all this stuff happening, them digging out that lake at the right time, or that like more so a big pond, but really just a mining quarry almost, and it got filled up with water, and it just so
mhm.
happened that all these big fish found their way in there, and they were able to survive or thrive for X amount of months, years, and you just kind of capitalize on it. That's such a
It was
crazy story. Everything lines up perfectly for it.
it was insane. It um, like it kind of spoiled me.
Yeah.
Like that's like why would you fish anywhere else? It's
Mhm.
like a couple miles down the road from my house,
Yeah.
and I used to work at a cabinet shop like maybe 2 miles away from it, and I'd fish there in my teens before work,
Yeah.
lunch break, and after till dark every single.
Dude, that's crazy.
And every day you go and you're catching like 30 pounds.
That's insane.
Never went there and didn't catch a five.
That's crazy.
And we caught what we would estimate to be up into like the low teens out of there.
Dude, so at that point, when you were fishing swim baits, and it sounds like you maybe did it for a couple months or maybe a year or two, did you ever realize like if those fish were kind of starting to realize that this stuff wasn't real, like the 316s or the bull shads and stuff, or did it just not matter?
They just, I mean, there was different times of year where they would eat different stuff, but I, 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 my first bait that I like made and sold and produced
Mhm.
spurred from uh, a bite I was on at that lake, and
Okay.
I really believe that's like the best way to make a lure, to
Yeah.
design a lure.
Mhm.
Like you could make a lure. There's lots of guys out there that do it just to turn a buck, you know. But I feel like the true process is to be a fisherman first and make it for make it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
So that's where the biscuit came from. I love the 8-inch bull shad, but it's thin,
Mhm.
and these fish they're looking for a big meal. So I made a 4-piece like burn stop bait,
Mhm.
but look how thick it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Super, super thick. For the people listening, it's probably what, like an inch and a quarter, inch and a half thick, if not more.
Yes, very thick.
Yeah.
Um, and what I did was I took everything that they were eating in there and made a hybrid kind of all those species, and I came out with this biscuit right here. And I made them and sold them for a while. I could never really make enough to support, but to
Right.
support myself and go full time.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a rough bait. This is still my original. I've caught fish up to 8 pounds on this thing,
That's sweet, man.
and it's beat up. But this thing, like I threw this in places where I'd fished my whole life, and fish came out of the woodworks that I never even knew it were there. Never even knew lived there.
Yeah.
And I'd have like 6+ pounders go fully airborne for it
Mhm.
because I was burning it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they could have been a bull shad the same
Right.
way, but I had some blow ups on this thing, and I want to remake it. My mold kind of wore out, and I kind of moved away, but I want to remake it because it was really good.
Right.
But
So
no one,
for the guys who were listening, what was it? Was it a 4-piece or 5-piece?
the 4-piece door hinge.
4-piece door hinge style swimmer. It almost like is the shape of a herring. It's kind of skinny, or it's kind of short, like height wise, and it's kind of long and slender. I mean, I guess for like an inch and a half, it's a pretty. I mean, dude, that looks like a herring or sucker pattern. Like that's pretty. Like when you held it up, I was like, that would probably kill on herring lakes up in the north, especially if you can
Yes.
burn it like that. That's so sick.
Yes, and it's a floater,
Okay.
but it has this big flat forehead on it,
Oh, is it like kind
and
of down?
it actually makes it's like a lipless.
That's
It
sweet.
actually makes it dive a couple feet,
That's
and
so
it
sick.
depending on where you hold your rod tip, you can hold it up and make it wake.
Yeah.
And I won several tournaments on this at night, slow rolling it,
Dang.
just roll it on top,
Mhm.
real slow. It was
Dang.
awesome.
That's so sick. That's so sick. So, you had made that bait. Was that the only bait you had made while that lake was kind of producing and still filled up before it was kind of a mud puddle, or did you mess around with other baits? Because I mean, having like having that sort of resource at your disposal where you could go out and make a bait and maybe catch a couple fives, a 6, 7, 8, 10 pound or whatever it may be, like there's a YouTube video of Aaron Weed from Uncut Angling, and he said like a fishing show or fishing product is 90% where you fish it and 10% product placement. He's like, if you can find a school of 16-inch crappie and catch 10 of them on a little plastic bait, people are gonna buy that bait because they think they can do that. Or if you go out and catch, two 10-pounders on a glide bait in a YouTube video, people are gonna think they can go out and do that anywhere. So I guess like
Yes.
having that at your disposal, were you like tinkering and messing around with other baits just to see how this big caliber of fish reacted and kind of using that as a marketing standpoint, or was it just that biscuit that you had made during that time?
I wish I had used it. I didn't know what I had,
Right.
like
Yeah.
I wish now that it's gone, I thought it would always be there.
Yeah.
Now that it's gone, I'm like, wow, I really missed a lot of
Mhm.
opportunity there. But yeah, I sold some. I sent some out to some bigger names. Um, I gave one. I don't know if you know who Manny B is.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah, yeah, he's a stick. I gave one to him. He smashed him on it. and it kind of came and went, and I got, moved on to a different line of work or whatever, and needed money or whatever, so
Yeah, yeah.
got away from making them. I didn't get really back into making swim baits till like a year ago.
Okay.
I've only been making glide baits for a year,
Right.
like to sell for a year, or like
Yeah.
glide baits that were worth tying on and
Yeah.
throwing.
So after that biscuit and kind of after that bite had dried up, were you still into the fishing side of things? It just wasn't on the like the production making baits standpoint side of stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm a I'm a fishing freak. I fish constantly, but I chase striper, I chase crappie, I chase bass.
Right. Yep.
Um, but yeah, I, it's kind of been streaky, spotty for
Yeah.
a while until recently. I really making glide baits is hard,
Oh yeah,
and
for sure.
especially like I was the type I didn't want to like go look it up. I wanted to like learn how to do it. So I did the hard way on everything, wasted all the money on the resin and the
Yeah.
silicone and all the trial and error. And I just finally figured out what makes them tick. So
Heck yeah, dude.
a lot of
So
practice.
yeah, so we'll just kind of fast forward a year ago. You get into the glide bait making thing, or you kind of wanna get into it. Did you? I assume that you're pretty decent at like carving with the wood and getting the master to where you want it to be.
Yeah, that I'm fairly comfortable with that. I actually don't use wood. I use PVC. It's like an outdoor trim material, and
Oh, are you
it's
talking about like what you side your or what you do the trim around your house and stuff with?
yeah, but it's like a real dense foam like. It's
Mm,
made out of PVC plastic,
okay.
and turns out it's the exact consistency of resin with microballoons in it.
Really?
So you can make a proto, slap hooks and split rings on it, and
Yeah.
go fish your proto without having to waterproof, without having
Dang.
to, and it has like the same structural properties. So it'll
That's
like you're not going to pull out
mhm.
screw eyes or anything. So that, and then from there I'll smooth it and put it in a mold. I actually had my little shad with it, which is a 6-inch slide. I I made the proto because I had made the big shad, which is 8-inch,
Yep.
and we were fishing for striper with it at PK, and we are like, we need a smaller profile. So I just took a picture of the 8-inch big shad and like zoomed it out on my phone and traced it back onto some paper and made
Yeah.
the little shad. Took that PVC version out to PK. It caught like 100 fish on it.
Dang, dude.
Striper, and like we had probably like 30 pounds on it. Like fish were shooting out from docks and just T-boning it. And it was like in one day it was like completely destroyed.
Mm,
And somehow I was able to like foil it, like
mhm.
put like butyl tape over it, like
Yeah.
foil it, and put it in the mold. And actually molded that bait that was just totally obliterated. And that was my little shad, which is still popular, but I discontinued it because I tried to like revamp my line and make it
Mm.
a little more professional.
Heck yeah, dude. Man, that's awesome that you were able to kind of stumble upon that and test your master to make sure that it's going to catch fish before you go through the process of molding it and all this other stuff. You can go out, carve a bait, test it the next day, and realistically speaking, in the next 2 or 3 days, you can have a resin version of that bait that swims right. You know kind of how to work the bait. You don't have to go mess around with it. You can go out and just go catch fish with the raw resin bait as soon as they come out of the mold. You don't have to worry about whatever it may be, sanding them down a whole bunch or whatnot. That's like that's crazy that you figure that out.
I mean I found it from this guy that kind of came and went on YouTube. Lure 'em up, I
Okay.
think is what he was called. He was this older, quirky carpenter guy with red hair, and he came and went on YouTube, and
Mm,
he had a bunch of old tricks that I watched and learned a lot of stuff from him.
man,
Um,
it's kind of sweet.
but but yeah, that's where I learned that from.
He saved you. He unknowingly saved you a bunch of time with whittling down on wood.
Yeah, and the stuff carves like a dream. There's no grain. It's just buttery. That's all I use now.
Huh. That's so
Yeah.
sweet. So you figured out you carve this master, go out catch a bunch of fish on it, or however that timeline goes out. Did so with the molding side of things, did it take you a little while to figure out how to use the silicone and how to, you know, successfully mold a bait to where maybe you don't let the silicone cure enough and you go and peel the mold apart and the inside's still liquid or whatever it may be. Was there a lot of trial and error between the molding process?
Yeah, you name a way you can mess it up, and I did it probably several times. I did several times what they call pouring a brick when you don't put enough mold release on it, and you
Mm,
just pour your proto into solid resin
yeah.
or solid silicone,
Oh, silicone.
and you got to cut it out with a razor blade knife.
Man, that's
And
brutal.
then I actually made a couple friends locally that threw me some bones too. That taught me how to like where the two nubs go in to
Mhm.
make the how do I where the two holes go
Yeah.
in on the
Yep.
back piece for the screw eye. You can actually mound up and make your parting line on this
Mm,
edge right here.
yeah.
That way, those two nubs that go in there aren't like halves. It's actually a whole piece.
Right.
Kind of hard to describe, but once you get like or like a tail slot,
Hmm.
you don't have your the piece that goes in to make your tail slot doesn't have to be from both halves of the mold.
Yeah.
You can in other words you can manipulate the parting line
Hmm.
to kind of catch whatever you want to
Yeah. It
put
doesn't have
in.
to be a 50-50. It can be a 47-53 if you have to work
No,
it around
it's
an edge.
for me it's 100%. I just stack it all on one side.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So like here, this won't make sense for the people that can't watch it, but like this
Yeah.
has a
Okay. That makes
mound
sense.
right
Yeah.
here, and these things that go in there
Yeah.
are they're all on that one side.
Okay, so
So
for
for
people listening, imagine, how like when you get some baits, there's that distinctive center line right over the nose, going all the way back to the tail, right in the center. Trevor kind of has his offset so that all the, I guess you'd call them almost details, like the building properties where the pin goes and all that stuff is kind of pushed to one side of the mold. So it's all, you don't have to worry about that partial line going right through the middle. That's a really good idea
yeah, and I even have it for the tail
for
slot
the tail
here.
slot. Yeah.
Otherwise, it would just be like two awkward little thin things trying to.
Mhm.
And what it does is it wears your mold out.
Yeah.
So, fun, like landing, like having bones thrown to me like that were really helpful
Right.
because otherwise, you pour 15 baits through your mold and it's worn out. And you got to make another one. Um, but those guys, Ryan Golden
Mm.
and Colton Green, have really
Oh yeah.
taught me a lot of stuff.
Heck yeah,
Yeah,
dude.
really,
Super
they're
cool
good friends of
guys.
mine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Heck yeah, man.
Yeah, I
So,
fish with Ryan all the time. We're tournament partners. So
oh hell yeah, dude. That's awesome,
yeah.
man. So you get to figure out the silicone, figure out kind of how to lay your bait in the clay and kind of cast your mold and that sort of thing. And then you enter into the whole I would say the hardest part of building your bait or kind of creating your whole bait's identity is figuring out your recipe, your microbloons to resin recipe and I know that they make 15% balloons to 75% or 85% resin. They make all sorts of stuff like that, but it seems
Hmm.
like a lot of guys like to make their own part A to part B, resin to microbloons, pour it for every single bait, weigh all that stuff out and all that. But either way, that's something that you have to pour at least one bait and figure out. And you're going through a lot of money buying resin, buying microbloons, and pouring stuff just to pull it out of the mold and pull it out of the mold and throw it into a bucket that's never going to see the light of day again because it sinks like a rock or floats like a balloon. You name it, whatever it may be. What was that whole process like? And if you, the question I always like to ask builders is kind of, what is your estimate of how many blanks or how much resin or how much money you kind of had to go through to to get to that point where your bait is now, where you can weigh it out without even blinking of an eye. You know what your resin recipe is.
Um, any bait maker that's done it the way I have, and I've talked to like several, they're like, dude, I have barrels,
Yeah, sounds about
barrels of
right.
like even in my last batch, something didn't go right, and this didn't
Mm,
set up on the belly right here. I have no idea, and that's the frustrating part. A lot of times you don't know why it happened.
yeah.
So it's thousands of dollars and many mess ups. And the thing with the resin that most guys use, it sets up in like 30 seconds.
Yep. Yeah.
So you can also mess it up by mixing it. Like it's a balancing act to get it all in there. And it starts thickening up if you don't get it into the small crevices
Hmm.
soon enough. You you're you just wasted a pour. So
Yeah.
that was a very long process.
Yeah.
I've used three different kinds of resin now, and it doesn't really come down to, but what it does come down to is shelf life. So a lot of people use that smooth on
Yep.
Featherlight,
Yeah.
and it has the comes pre-mixed with the micro balloons, but that stuff has like a couple months shelf life.
Mm.
And I had a lot of issues with that stuff, so I'm using a different product now where I just mix it in,
Heck yeah.
and it's working good.
Yeah, and you got to think your molds don't care if it's a dud bait or not. Like your molds, I don't know. I think I've talked about it with some other builders, but your molds essentially have a lifetime of you can pour 50, 60 baits out of a mold before it's kind of starting to
Mm-hmm.
deteriorate. That chemical reaction starting to take a wear on that silicone. You're starting to get pitting, or whatever it may be. Stuff's getting weak at that point in time. So you have one mold, you pour your mold, or yeah, you pour your mold with your silicone. Your silicone takes forever to figure out how silicone works. You get that, and then say you pour 20 resin baits, and finally that 21st resin bait is what you have. Okay, cool. That mold only has 20 to 60 more baits left in it when you got to turn around and start making more silicone molds. So I don't know if like we've really ever talked about that on the show, where it's a balancing act. Like, okay, today I'm going to make 20 molds, and that's going to get me through the next 6 months. And then I'm going to pour baits. And then in the next 6 months, I'm going to have to dedicate a day or a week to making more molds, so I don't have to worry about that and break that stuff out for another 6 months to a year. Like, it's a balancing act on
Mm-hmm.
how to essentially like schedule your time and make it so you're not going to screw yourself over and have to spend a week messing around with making a new mold rather than just pouring baits. Like, making them, there's no money in making your molds. It's pouring baits and painting baits and selling baits is where you start to sell baits and make that money. It's I don't know, it's a balancing act, man. And it's always really interesting to see how guys do it and see how they I guess schedule their time out for a month or 2 months. Kind of, they know how many drops they're gonna do. They know when their molds are gonna be up, or kind of the lifeline of their, or lifetime of their molds, and they just kind of got to plan accordingly to that.
Yeah, um, if you want to do lure making for a living, I used to hate making molds, and I would like put it off because I was
Mhm.
it's messy, it's
Yeah.
sticky, it's easy to mess up. You have to that's the backside of lure making. You have to get comfortable and confident with making molds because you have to make a mold for pretty much everything.
Mhm.
Like we have, if you have rubber tails
Oh
or
yeah.
silicone tails, you have a mold for your tail too. Um, and now I'm getting into soft plastics and making my own injection molds. So you have to conquer that beast. And I would say that one of the biggest tools that helped me was a vacuum chamber
Yep.
to get the bubbles out. So,
Yeah.
and the nice thing about most silicones is you have like hours and hours
Mhm.
to work with it. Like
Yeah.
it's not going to set up. It normally takes like 24 hours to fully
Mhm.
set. So it's a little more forgiving.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Whereas the resin, you get 30, 40 seconds if you're lucky. And even then, like, you look at a resin bait, you look at some baits, if it's a 2, 3 piece bait, you look and not necessarily wasting material, but you're going through a lot of resin with those poor spots that you got to cut off and sand off, and how much of the
Hmm.
bait you sand off, and just a couple other things. And it's like, wow, like there's a lot that goes into one resin bait. Guys are always, oh, it only costs, this guy XYZ amount to make a bait. Yeah, but you also got to think about all the material that goes through or that they went through to make that bait. It's really interesting, and I feel like if guys don't see it in person, they don't get a good representation of what that whole process is like, and kind of how like time consuming and makes guys go bankrupt because they have to go through this trial and error before they can even pour a resin bait to sell. And then you got to find either a
Yeah.
painter or paint the bait to sell it, unless you're just content with selling raw baits. Like it's a real process, and guys I feel like overlook it in the buying portion of swim bait fishing.
Yeah, and there's a lot in between taking it out of the mold and painting it too.
Yeah.
Like I'm working on a batch of 18 right now, and after I demolded, it took me an entire day to cut sprues off,
Yeah.
then hand carve down to the true
Yeah.
um, dimension, and then sand all my parting lines, fill little holes that
Yep.
came up, and
Let's say fill
then
divots.
you gotta weight tune, you gotta prime, you gotta make sure you don't get the grease from your hands all over the. You gotta wash them.
Wash them. Yep.
Paint prep is a huge thing. It's something I struggled with for a long time, still do, but I figured out what kind of works for me. But
And then you got to even
um,
think it probably takes you 2 hours to install all the hardware, like all the hooks and split rings and stuff. Like, I mean, that takes
oh yeah,
it takes
yeah,
time, man. And people just don't even think. Okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about. I don't know if you make the boxes, but your baits come in a really cool wooden box. Like,
yes.
that's not that doesn't take you 5 minutes to make. I mean, that takes you some time to make it, fill it up, slap the label on it. Like, it's a whole process. Guys just see the end product and assume, oh, he can do this in a day. Whereas there's a whole back catalog of stuff that leads up to that day of shipping.
Yeah, it's gonna. I've been trying to crunch for this batch of 20, and it takes a full week to
Yeah.
just make 20 for me. I could hire somebody or whatever to
Mhm.
bump up the production, but yeah, I make all the boxes by hand. Um, my studio and my workshop is set up. My dad, we're neighbors, so
Okay. Heck yeah.
um, it's all set up in his workshop, so I have full access to all the tools and saws and stuff that I would need, and plenty of lumber laying around. So,
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah.
yep,
So
all handmade, and we take pride in
yeah,
our product.
yeah. That's what I was gonna say. So your box, it's obviously a box, but you have like a sliding piece of like Lexan, right? That's like the front
Hmm.
of it essentially, and then do you mail it, like just throw the tracking label on that so like you can see the bait and stuff, or do you put it in like an actual priority mailbox or whatever that may be?
I typically put it
Okay.
in a priority box and wrap it in bubble wrap.
Okay.
Well, like I was even talking to my wife today. We're like, we have to figure out if we really want to keep doing this, because
Right.
not only am I having to pay for the to ship the weight of the lure, I
Mm-hmm.
have to ship the that big heavy wooden
Yeah.
box too, and it like doubles the shipping rate too. So,
Right.
I have mailed them where I just taped it and
Mhm.
mailed it, but I didn't put a clear lid. I put like a
Mhm.
white lid so people couldn't see the
Right. Right.
lure in there. So
Which
you're
makes
like,
yeah, yeah. It's cool, like
going
to
fishing tomorrow.
yeah. It's cool for, your first 100 customers to have a cool box, but you also have to think, and people have to think, like that's taking time out of your building, that's taking money out of your profit margins to maybe work on another project or work on something else. Like, yeah, it's super
Yeah.
cool. And I like at one point in time I did something not necessarily similar to that, but I did something that people really, really liked, but I just had to stop because like financially it was not worth my time to spend the money on the product and to spend the time packaging every single magazine up with that thing. And it just came
Yes.
down to it wasn't worth my time to spend an extra minute and a half on every magazine order Whereas I could just package it up and throw it in the box and it's ready to go. And it sucks, you want it to have that, that handmade feel or that kind of one-off feeling. But at some point in time, it's either fulfill more orders or make everybody feel super happy that they, got this one thing from you. And at the end, it's like, if I can fulfill more orders, I can get more product out there and more people will be intrigued with what I have, not necessarily the handful of people that get this thing. So it's kind of a
Yeah.
trade-off. And everybody would love to be able to do like a little knick-knack or whatever it may be with their product. But in the end of the day, it's like what's most efficient for fulfilling packaging and selling rather than kind of that experience. Kind of have to draw the line somewhere, I feel like.
Mhm. Yeah, it was definitely something that's already like I haven't been big enough to even do a drop yet until right now. Like
Yeah.
I'm working on my first batch for a drop. So I've always, one or two at a time, you can afford to make a box for the customer.
Yep.
And each customer means more, so you're trying to go above and
Yeah.
beyond for them. Um, but I do also sell a lot of lures locally in local tackle shops, and I think for like a retail presentation,
Mhm.
I'll probably always do wooden boxes for those.
Right.
But yeah, eventually it's not going to be it's not cost effective to mail them in that wooden box.
Yeah. But like you
We talked
said,
about making it thinner or lighter, but it's just we'll have to make that decision.
right. And like you said, it means a little bit more if somebody goes to the store and they get a cool box rather than,
Yeah.
realistically, is somebody going to enjoy the box so much that they're going to pay 12, $15 in shipping just so they can have that box, which there are guys who would. I mean, I collect boxes. I have a bunch of boxes from all sorts of baits and stuff, but like again, at what point in time is it more cost efficient just to put it in a little U-line box inside the mailer than in the
Yeah.
cool custom boxes? And right now people like saving money where they can. So as cool as it is, it might just be for the best if you guys go to the U-line boxes, and maybe if somebody wants to, they can check a box on your site that they want a custom box for an extra 15, 16 bucks, whatever that
Yeah.
price may be. And that might be something that people are willing to pay for if they really want that box. It might not be a freebie anymore. It might be something you have to charge a little bit for just to make it worth everybody's time. And I mean, I think that there's people out there that would pay that for a cool custom box with not a bad of the eye at all.
Yeah, and we could get creative and like brand the side of it with my
Mhm.
logo and do
Yeah,
all
yeah.
kinds of cool stuff. But there's even some other like I think it's Vox on Instagram.
Okay.
He makes, I think Throwback uses
Oh,
him, and he makes
Volk,
like
Volk,
those Volk.
Volk, VOLK.
Okay, yeah, that's right. But he makes like those like foam
Mhm.
cutouts with the trebles go and
Yeah,
the
yeah.
logo, and like there's some other options we might look into
Mhm.
for packaging.
Heck yeah.
And also my Ace, which is my 8-inch
Okay.
glide, the tail, it has to stay, like you can see this one's been stored and it's a little
Mhm.
crooked.
Mhm.
It has to stay straight.
Right.
So we're gonna have to find out how to keep that straight as well.
Yeah,
Um,
it's always fun to kind of get a problem and have to brainstorm an idea around it, something that's going to be cost effective and keep the pristine class of whatever you're shipping. That's like the magazine stuff. It's always like 99% of the time they come in in like a clear Ziploc bag or some kind of clear poly bag, and then it goes into shipping poly bag. And it's always just like, what can I do to make it easy on myself, just to throw them in something, whether it be a Ziploc bag or whatnot, just to protect it. Because USPS or FedEx or UPS, whatever it goes through, they don't care what's in that package. It's going to get bent up. It's going to get left out in the rain or whatever it may be. That's why I try to go as far as I can without spending a crazy amount of money on super padded mailers or whatever it may be. Just kind of, yeah, at some point in time, you have to almost cut your losses and just say, this is as good as it's going to be. And if somebody has a problem, I'll just ship them a new one again. And that's easier said with a magazine rather than, $150 glide bait. That's kind of
right,
more of a ship it once, get it there and be happy rather than have to ship them two or three extra because something happened like with a magazine.
right.
Heck yeah, dude. So let's go through your chronological order of baits. So we talked about the biscuit. Was the next bait your 8-inch glide?
I made. I have a. I made a bluegill
Okay.
4-piece,
Dang, dude, that actually looks
very
good.
similar.
Yeah. So it's got
Um,
that 4-piece door hinge style
yeah,
hinging if you guys aren't watching on YouTube.
and this thing's killer. I just it's not anything special,
Dude, that's
and
like
I tried
really
to.
clean. That's like really,
Oh,
really
this. Yeah, I have a video on my YouTube of me doing this whole process, and kind of how to do door hinge because I finally figured out how to do it.
okay.
It's just dowels that you glue in there.
Mm,
It's really simple. But yeah, you can see I finally learned the comparison from the bluegill to the biscuit. I finally learned how to do door hinge. This one, I didn't know that it was dowels, and I built up all these joint pieces with Bondo and hand
dang.
carved them. So I did it the hard way, definitely on that. But this, I've it's kind of a little 316y vibey, and I just wanted to. It's not original, I wanted to kind of stay with um kind of something little more unique.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I haven't really. I don't think I've ever even sold one of those,
Well,
but
dude,
that was a cool bait.
it looks really, really good. It's super
Yeah,
clean looking.
yeah, I really liked it. Swims great. Does everything I wanted it to do, but that one kind of fell by the wayside. Um, then I did my. I don't have one with me. I have some pieces of one, but I did my big shad, which was an 8-inch, and I actually had that one made for several years. And the first time we went out to PK, we were trying to catch big striper,
Mm,
and they were on big gizzard shad, and I threw that 8-inch
hmm.
and broke it off on a giant striper. The
Dang.
snap the snap opened up.
Mm,
But luckily, I had like it's a common thing when you make a body of a swim bait to make a mold for it as a one like just
yep.
the body by itself,
Yeah.
like one piece, and then you can make a wake or a glide or whatever with and do different things with that.
Mm,
So I had that. So
mm,
I took that, poured something through the. I had a mold for it.
yep.
I poured one through, cut it in half, and made that 8-inch, and it has smashed for the guys that still have them. Still smashing striper. The thing was a money bait, kind of a um, chopper style. Then I the 6-inch little shad was just a smaller version of that.
Yeah.
That one did pretty well. But then I met Steve Parks, and he kind of opened my eyes to how high the bar should be that I'm shooting for. And I went home that day and started revamping my whole line. So since then, I've come out with the Ace, and the Ace has undergone several changes, including this tail slot. This tail slot is not just the tail doesn't just stick in there. It's like opened up like a V.
Yeah.
So this tail can actually move back and forth in there. It gives it some wiggle room, and then maybe hard to see, but right at the base of the tail, it there's a real thin section, so it pivots off of that thin section. And what that does for this Ace, what I think it makes it really unique is it acts like an 8-inch on like a real slow, like when you're not giving much input, you can get it to go real wide
Yeah.
because it has that length. But when you chop it, you're compressing that tail to the side, and it acts more like a 6-inch chopper. So it's really a hybrid um, glide in that way. It can act like this full length when you're not bending this tail, but when
Right.
you really give it some side input, it bends that tail back and forth
Yeah.
and allows. And this thing is so fluid. It's so fun to fish. I think it's very special. It's only been like the first ones have only been out for like a week or so,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it's already done pretty well.
That's awesome. So
Um,
you guys who are listening and not watching, it's essentially the little tail slot, how most tail slots are super tight, keep that tail super tight. This tail slot's wallowed out a little bit so that tail can actually wag when you fish it really hard. It can kind of go side to side and flex with the bait. And I feel like that just kind of helps that hinge close a lot faster. And like Trevor was saying, you can fish it really, really fast and it'll kind of go back and forth, shoot back and forth, super choppy zigzag, however you want to say it. That's actually really, really cool. And I bet you that makes quite a bit of difference too.
it does, and what I find is it's always making, like, I'm not worried about this tail is slightly kinked
Hmm.
off to the side, but in the water, it's always making these little micro adjustments in current, whatever it needs to
Yeah.
do. And you talk about a bait that can burn like blistering speeds. This
Mhm.
thing gets in, it's really fluid, and like the first cast I ever did made with it, I was with some customers on the Brazos River below PK,
Mhm.
and I was like, look how this thing can burn. I cast it across this pool and like burned it all the way in and stopped it right at my feet and one smoked it
That's so
right at my
sick.
feet. But you could fish this thing like a bull shad, like just
Mhm.
burn the fire out of it,
Yeah.
and it stays locked in. And that tail is, I think, a big part of that. I'm really pleased with how that turned out. That's kind of my flagship model. Um, then I made this little guy. This is a 4-inch nugget. Um, it's typically very hard to make a glide bait this size because by the time you add screw eyes, hardware, hooks, split rings, all that hardware just makes it sink like a rock.
Yeah.
So what I did to combat that was make it pretty thick.
Mm.
So it's probably what, almost like 5/8, 3/4 thick,
Yeah.
pretty chunky. That's why I kind of named it the Nugget, and that's what I did to kind of get as much buoyancy
Hmm.
pulling up to support.
Yeah.
Um, just because they don't sell screw eyes much smaller than, like, I have the smallest ones you could buy.
Mm.
So there's kind of a limit to how small you can make it, but this is just under 4 inches, and this thing is super fun. It totally gets bit. I have guys that fish it during the crappie spawn
Oh,
for
that's
crappie.
yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it burns really well. You can kind of twitch it, and actually surprisingly gets pretty wide and fishes pretty similar to a big glide bait for its size. But one thing I have a kind of a disclaimer on my site: you can overpower it
Mm.
because it's not an 8-inch bait, and if you're giving
Right.
it the same poles and like full half reel turns, it's just you're just gonna totally overpower it. So it just takes a kind of like walking a spook with the big poles or walking a frog.
Yeah.
Frog is real short, so it only takes you little 1 inch
Yeah.
twitches. But
Um,
this really
yeah,
fun.
that caught my eye real quick if you want to hold that back up. So little 4-inch glide bait, and you were just talking about the weight on it. And is that why you have a loop knot rather than a swivel or a clip tied onto the front of that, so you get a little bit more action out of it without
Yeah,
letting
I
it down?
recommend. Yes, yeah, I recommend tying a loop knot on all glide baits, especially big ones. If you get 20-pound fluorocarbon,
Hmm.
it has quite a bit of memory, like
Yeah.
stiffness to it. And I think if you tie it like you know, any of your cinch down
A
knots
direct
on it,
knot. Yep.
which I see a lot of guys doing, I feel like it probably could restrict the
Mhm.
action, especially when you get a small bait like this
Right.
as well. It needs that free range of motion. Yeah, I tie a loop knot on all my glides.
Interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that before. It makes sense.
Yeah, I
It
just
does make a lot of sense.
well, another thing we could get into is sound.
Oh, yeah. I've
Um,
talked about that a lot on here.
we, we ran into a problem on PK where it gets hammered with
Mhm.
glide baits, right? So every dock, every point, all these community spots,
Yeah.
they've seen this a bait go chopping past them, click clack, rattling really loud. And I think that's why people like Grady cod, which he fishes out there, have done really good on the flag.
On the flag because it's like
The
silent. It's
soft
creepy.
glide bait, it's silent. Yeah, so that's something we've really been considering out there. And I made a version of the Ace where I put a like a thick O-ring
Yep.
inside the joint, and I took the pin out and wrapped the pin in shrink tubing
Mm.
and put it back in so the pin's not rattling against the screw eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And it made a completely silent version of the Ace. And I'll probably be offering that eventually. And they reacted to it really well.
That's crazy.
Actually, I don't know if you know, but Greenleaf puts on a swim bait classic.
Yep. Yeah.
Twice a year, and me and Ryan Golden fished it. We actually won it this spring, and I caught a key fish on that silent Ace.
Dang. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. I've talked about sound a lot, more so like the clacking of like crankdowns and stuff, but also on like citizens or battle shats and stuff where it has that weighted beast hook. I've talked about how shrink wrapping or wrapping that beast hook in cloth, how it doesn't tick when you run it across rocks and whatnot, and never had a firsthand experience ever doing it. But I always talk, or I've talked about it, how I guarantee that there are some fish that hear that ticking. It sounds like a drop shot weight or a jig ticking on the bottom, and they're like, that's not a real fish. But if you shrink wrapped it or wrapped it in pipe cleaner or whatever else it may be, that might be the determining factor between a fish eating it or a fish hearing that click and just turning around and circling back underneath the dock or whatever it may be. And that's interesting, the shrink tubing around the pin to not give off that squeak and clack and stuff. Like it, from where I'm at right now, like that makes a lot of sense, like in my understanding or my thought process behind that. And then I'm sure maybe you've even done that too, where you think of something and maybe you mess around with a bait and you're like, I can't believe I'm doing all this for a bass that at the end of it might not even care. Like there could be a point in time where the bass just don't even care. They just come out and they decide that they don't want to eat this bait. But the next day when you go out with a dampered bait, they're like, oh, I want to eat this today. It's kind of an interesting thing, and I feel like it makes more people go mad than they arrive to a conclusion on why a bass does or doesn't do something.
Yeah, well, with you see baits come and go. Like the first time they saw an A rig, they
Yeah.
mowed it down. The first time they saw a Senko
Mhm.
a glide bait, they mowed it down. And a glide bait's kind of getting to the point where it's been thrown for you know quite a few years, and these fish have seen it a lot. So it's up to us as fishermen to adapt and start. And that's why you see the soft glide baits. That's why you see some new innovations coming out, and I'd like to be on the leading edge of that.
That's awesome, dude. Man,
And
that's
then little sneak peek, 5.5 inch coming out too.
that's sick. That looks so good. Is that the PVC
Yes,
material you were talking about, or is that clay?
it's PVC. It's just it's
Oh,
primered.
okay, yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's how I smooth everything, by putting a lot of primer on it. And this has the same open tail slot design where it can move back and forth.
Heck yeah, dude. Yeah, it's like a little pivoting tail of it, almost.
Yes.
Heck yeah, man. So you've been at it for about, we'll just say roundabout about a year selling baits, whatnot. What's it been like seeing people have success on your baits? What's that feeling like for you?
That's what drives us as bait makers. There's not a better feeling in the world than to see someone stoked on your baits. Like it's kind of made me like addicted to Instagram, not in the typical way, but like always checking for those, getting tagged or seeing
Yeah.
a fish catch. And I'm always like, get up in the morning. Okay, let's see what if anything cool has happened with the baits, and it's all new to me, so it's really exciting. And I really thrive off of the net, the networking, the local, um, the the connections I've been able to make locally, going out fishing with guys and developing friendships and stuff just through giving them a bait. And
Mhm.
I don't have a boat right now, so you can kind of schmooze a lot of the locals with the boat with a glide bait, and then
Yeah.
you get to go out on a boat. So working on getting a boat, but I just actually sold mine today. So
Heck yeah,
in
dude.
between boats.
It's awesome, man. So yeah, there's nothing better than seeing people enjoy and kind of l- I guess enjoy the time you put into your work and you gift it to them or they buy it from you or whatever it may be, and they go out that day or that week, or they take it out at one point in time and they catch a fish on it and they send you a picture. And I mean, that just means the world when somebody finds joy in a product that you produce by hand, by yourself, in your man cave or at your computer desk, whatever it may be. It's a crazy feeling to think, wow, like somebody paid their hard-earned money for this thing, and they're finding enjoyment out of it, entertainment out of it, whatever it may be. It's a really unique, special feeling that I tell guys you can't really describe it. It's just kind of something that you have to do, and kind of people have to take a liking to it for you to realize, like, man, that's a really, really strange feeling that you created something with your hands, and people are paying for it and enjoying it and having a good time with it.
Yeah, it's deeply satisfying.
Yeah.
And like I said before, where I thrived off of creating and create making stuff with my hands, job completion, stepping back and looking at the product
Mhm.
that I made and going, for myself, yeah, that looks nice, but that takes it a step further
Yeah.
when you put it in someone else's hands and they're just as stoked about it. So it's deeply satisfying. It's kind of what drives me to keep on pushing just for them. So
Yeah, especially in the kind of like in a niche scene where there's other options, but people
oh
buy
yeah,
your option or your product, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, this is the best one on the market, or this is my favorite on the market." Tag you in your stories or whatever it may be. It's a very humbling experience, and it's kind of like, man, like it almost feels like you're lucky that somebody took a chance with your thing, and they're kind of I mean, it's weird that they want to share it with their followers or their people. It's kind of all in all, it's just a crazy feeling when somebody kind of supports you like that.
yeah, yeah. It's kind of like, who am I that
Yeah.
they would there's there's plenty of other options out there, like you said. But yeah, um, it's definitely very rewarding. And growing this business has been really slow, and I've been really hesitant and cautious through a lot of steps. But I'm finally feel like I'm picking up some momentum where I can kind of move boldly, and it's very enjoyable,
Yeah, dude. I think it
very
kind of
nice.
says something about your character and your business practice that you had shown that bluegill, and I was saying that it looked really good and stuff, and you're like, yeah, but it looks a little too 316 for my liking. Like, it's never been available. Probably won't be ever available unless I change it up a little bit. I mean, there's countless amount of people who would take that compliment, or just hear that stuff and they'd go and mold the bait, or already mold the bait and selling the bait. Whereas it almost seems like you take a lot of pride in your work and your name and your business name, where it's like, okay, this might kind of be skewed, like looking like somebody else's bait. So I'm going to lay off of that, and maybe I'll come back with it with a fresh mind or a fresh idea or whatever it may be. And I'll just kind of roll with what I have, because I know that it's unique or original in its own way. And kind of, I don't have to kind of be thrown in the limelight for people saying that, oh, this looks like this bait or this looks like that bait, whatever it may be. You're just kind of on the clear and clear, essentially.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, I've actually, like, my first post on Universe, I just got totally destroyed.
Mm.
But but people are going to say that regardless,
Right. Yeah.
Like, I know my process is I have a clean conscience on my process. Um, yeah, I found out real quick the backside of Universe, but I definitely asked for it by just
Right.
being a new guy and coming in there and going, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And I got a lot of thoughts,
Mhm.
but it was a good lesson to learn. So
Yeah, man. You always got to think that there are going to be people who just don't like people trying to get into the scene, or whatever it may be. They think that since they've been a part of the group for 2 years, that they're king shit and they think that they've seen every single bait ever and they think that they hold the law book or whatever it may be. And it's kind of like, okay, you know, as much as it's played out, a shad is a shad is a shad. You know, you can only
Yeah.
make a fish look so different. And I know that I make jokes and stuff about baits looking the same, but it all really
Yeah.
comes down
All
to
your brush tail shad glides.
yeah. It all comes down to there's only so many shad patterns that you can paint, that you can carve, that you can make. It's more of making modifications to the tail slot like you were talking
Yes.
about, or to the dampering side of the bait, or making a
Hmm.
small glide swim wide, or whatever it may be. Yes, it may look alike, but as long as the swim is different, and like you said, you have a clean conscience when you're doing it and it's not for malicious intent that I really like the mouth of this style glide bait, so I'm going to copy and paste that onto my bait, whatever it may be. As long
Yeah.
as you go with it and, you carve it correctly and kind of go about what a shad looks like. I mean, you really can't piss and moan about somebody else's bait, being that, unless it's, like I said, malicious intent. It's got the same exact fins, same exact tail style, joints in the
Yeah.
same place, whatever it may be, same
Right.
specs down to a T. You kind of have to have some give, because there's only so many ways that you can paint a bluegill or paint a shad or carve a shad, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And I start off each of my designs by taking a picture of a real fish,
Yeah,
putting it, turning all the lights off, turning my brightness up, putting my phone under a sketch pad, and tracing a real picture of a real fish.
yeah,
So
yeah,
that's the base that I start on. So
100%, dude. Last two questions for you. What's the biggest fish on one of your baits so far? Whether it's your fish or customer's fish, or maybe the biggest fish like since kind of the company started within the last year, maybe just all time from one of the baits you've carved. What are a couple of the biggest fish you've seen off of your stuff so far?
by far the biscuit has caught this ugly thing has caught the biggest fish, and probably mainly because I was fishing it at toll road at
Right,
that
yeah.
toll road pond. But I caught like some 8 pounders on this thing. I had one day where I caught like several sevens and a eight and a couple sixes. They were just like smoking it. But like as far as my newer stuff, like I said, this one has only been that my ace has only been in people's hands for a few weeks. Maybe some other guys. Before I revised it,
Mhm.
I had an older version, and there's a few guys that have that one. I know Elam
I was gonna
Jacoby
say,
has one.
Elam's been killing it on that. He seems like he's posting a story too every day with that
Yeah,
bait.
yeah, yeah. So, but I've had two guys now that have dumped like 8 to 10 pound fish right at the boat. So it definitely has
Yeah.
some big fish attracting power, and I'm really excited to see um, where it's gonna go.
Sick. I
The
know
nugget,
Noah from NTX Angler, or NTX Angler.
yes,
He's been catching a bunch of fish, and he just got that bait a
yes,
couple days ago.
yeah, yeah. He was one of the first,
That's
so
sick.
that's how new it is.
So cool, dude.
Yeah. Those, putting your bait in the hands of those. Like I remember how it was for me and probably you at the same time, that 16, 17,
Yeah.
18 year range. They can fish so much more than we
Yeah.
can.
It's
So you
crazy.
put your bait in the hands of these guys, and like I took them out when I gave them the baits to below Pete. We fished below the dam at PK and up on the lake some, and we caught some fish. And oh yeah, cool. And then he posts he's back out there the next day, and I was like, well, that's why I like to have my baits in the hands of these
Yeah.
younger guys, because they can definitely put in the hours.
100%.
And it's a huge tool to me to have my bait in the hands of people that can give me feedback, that can post on their story.
Yep.
And I'll more than willingly give them free baits
Yeah.
in exchange for that. So I take care of my guys.
Heck yeah, dude. Well, you were picking up the nugget to, I think, talk about that a little bit.
Oh yes. Caught some slab crappie on this thing
That's sick.
during the spawn. Uh, the way I found the pattern, I was going down. There's a pond or a small lake, private lake, right by my house, and I was going down the bank. It was like pre-spawn, and I was getting some good glide bait fish.
Mm.
I had a crappie try to come up and eat my ace, and it was probably like a 2 pounder,
Oh my
and it
gosh.
was all like blacked out and
Mm.
spawning colors, and it just came up and rolled on it right at my feet, and I was like, no way. Well, I happened to have my nugget with it, and then
Yeah,
like the next 10 minutes were just insane.
dude,
They
that's
were just coming up and smoking this thing. So this has a multi-species bait. I know, it doesn't fit into our little stigma of
mhm,
hardcore bass angling,
right.
but I've caught hybrids on this. I've
Mm.
caught a bunch of bass and crappie. Uh, and I don't know if you know Tom Western up in Colorado.
Sounds familiar.
He fishes like BFS glide baits for
Okay.
trout. So I've even painted one up in like a brown trout pattern and sent it up to him. So it's being fished for up there for big brown trout and stuff, which is I think
That's
is super
legit,
cool.
man. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you can see all that on my page. I have it all posted up.
Heck yeah, dude. And then what's the gear you recommend? Like what's kind of maybe your all around rod that you're fishing 2 out of your 3 baits, or maybe all your baits, or kind of what's the power and action style rod you would suggest guys to have?
I have a Madness rods, 8 foot. What was it? It's 805, so it's 8 foot, medium heavy, moderate fast.
Okay.
Best rod I've ever put in my hands. It's a North Fork blank. Madness does an incredible job. I actually won that rod on the Pursuit tournament that Grant
Oh,
puts on.
that's awesome.
I won. I won that from a PK fish, a 9.5 or
That's
something
sick.
that I caught out there.
That's legit.
Um, yeah, I had that rod, best rod I've ever put in my hands. I actually, unfortunately, just broke it the other day and have no idea what happened. I just picked it up and the tip was down by my bait. I was
Mm,
like, no. But luckily, I ordered one right before I entered that tournament.
mhm.
So I have another one coming in like in the next couple days. So
Sweet.
I've been really impressed with Madness over there. I've actually met him, been to his
I was
house.
gonna say he's probably pretty local to you, or at least around that Texas area, I know.
He's in Austin area, so yeah, he's probably like 3-4 hours. But I'll make a swing down there every once in a while and meet up with Elam or fish with some of the. Last time I went there, I fished with Elam Jacoby in the morning at Travis. Then I swung to Lake Austin and fished with Dylan with
Oh,
Texas Chunk.
yep.
He had an extra paddle board. He's like, "Yeah, man, come on." Um, Fished with him, and then I went out and met Casey at his house from
That's
Madness, and then it was like it's like the best day ever. It's pretty cool.
that's awesome, dude. Fishy, fishy day for sure.
Yeah, dude.
Um, what
And then
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say the nugget. Obviously, you're gonna want to fish it on a small rod,
Yeah.
a jerk bait rod. 6'9", 7 foot, uh, medium heavy, something real soft.
Heck yeah, dude. You had mentioned the YouTube channel earlier. So what are all the socials that we can find you? Probably Instagram, YouTube, is there Facebook maybe, or what else is there?
I have a Facebook. I'm not super active on it. It's mainly my Instagram that I'm working on right now. That is outside the box underscore lure co.
Perfect.
Um, I just rebranded that to make it a little more lure specific, but my YouTube is fishing outside the box. And I kind of made a run at the YouTube thing for a while, and there was some instructionals and some
Yeah.
lure making stuff, kind of some variety on there. And I plan on posting on there again. It's just you probably know as well as I do. You have to. It's hard to do everything at once,
Yeah, man.
especially editing and
Oh yeah.
running a YouTube channel and making lures, and so
Heck
uh,
yeah, dude.
balancing act for sure.
So this will go up on Monday. You're gonna have your site and stuff up on this Friday, right? If I remember correctly, or you're gonna try to.
Yeah, we're working on getting the site up. There was like a bug with the point of purchase, like the store side of things. So we're working with the company to get that straightened out. But I'm trying to have it up before my drop on Friday, which is what I'm shooting for. The reason I'm rushing this drop is because I don't know if you know Caleb York from York Casting.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know Caleb.
Really cool. Yeah, really cool guy. Just reached out to him the other day, and we like really hit it off, connected on a bunch of different points. And
Yeah,
um, I was gonna send him some baits to kind of take a look at and promote. But he's like, hey man,
just come up
uh,
here and fish them.
well, I was gonna come out to South Carolina to like film a show because
Yeah,
he has York Casting TV.
yep.
I was like, dude, I'll come up there. He's like, yeah, come on. But then he's like, hey, we're going to. How would you like to go to Canada?
That's
And
yeah.
I was like, yeah, tell me more. So he had just booked this trip to go up to a remote fly-in
Mm,
fishing trip
yeah.
in Ontario, and it was like they had it all like booked out and all the spots filled, but one of the guys ended up having some health
Mm,
issues and couldn't make it, so the spot opened up for me, and so I've been having to like pull together the funds and the
yeah.
passport and buy tickets, trying to figure out how to get my rods up there, all in very short notice because I'm leaving on the 9th.
Oh
So
dang. Okay.
yeah, it's like he was like, "How'd you like to go to Canada in 2 weeks?" It's like, yeah, I'll try. So um, please go buy my glide baits on the Trevors because what's gonna send me to Canada.
That's awesome,
So
dude. I'll put the website and everything in the show notes. So if you do have any available, hopefully you don't, but if
yes,
you have one or two, the guys who are listening to this and want to check it out can go down in the show notes in the description, whatever they're watching or listening on, and they can snag one. And as always, I'll have all your socials, your YouTube and Instagram and stuff in the description. So guys who can follow you or guys who don't follow you can go follow you on those platforms, support you there. Um, I'm trying to think of anything else that we
I
maybe
will
do.
be dropping aces and nuggets.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so a bigger batch of aces, but a few. I'll be dropping a few nuggets in there too as well.
Heck yeah,
So
dude. Um, yeah, man. Is there anything that we had kind of slated to talk about that we didn't get to, slotted to talk about that we didn't get to? I'm trying to think.
um, just that my also another big passion of mine is lure design.
Yes.
Um, so I'm working with a he's a big name in the industry, but he's kind of on the backside of the industry. So I don't know if a lot of people have heard his name, but Steve Parks, he owns Rage Tail. Um, I'm partnered with him to make some swim baits, some live scope specific stuff as well. And then there's a bunch of stuff I can't even really even. I'm kind of legally bound on some of this stuff
Right.
as
Yeah.
well too. So just all that to say, stay tuned, keep your eye out for outside the box lure co because um, this is there's more to come. So
Heck
this
yeah,
is
dude.
just the tip of the iceberg.
That's so awesome, man. So awesome. And as always, I'll put all Trevor's stuff in the show notes, like I said, so you guys go follow him if you're not already. When you're over there following him on Instagram, if for some reason you're not following the podcast, make sure you guys go do that. Scales and Tails _ media on Instagram. I think it's Scales and Tails media on YouTube too. I don't know, kind of falling behind on the YouTube thing because I haven't been able to fish. Go figure. That's kind of what Trevor and I talked about for about a quarter. This has not been able to fish ourselves because we have prior obligations to bait building and to whatever else that I'm up to. But as always, Trevor, I want to thank you for coming on. And like I said, we'll have the website link. So if there's maybe a bait or two left that didn't sell over the course of the next two days until this one drops, somebody can go down there and pick one of those up. That'll be kind of help Trevor make his way up to Canada so he can go film some stuff with Caleb and all those guys. But yeah, man. As always, Trevor, I want to thank you for coming on, man. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this episode. Like I said, make sure you guys follow Trevor. Make sure you check out the website. Even if there's not any baits on there, just go check out the website so you guys can go see when there are baits on there. You guys know what to do. You can't piss and moan that you guys missed out on a drop or whatever else it may be. But as always, guys, I want to thank you for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. I will talk to you guys next time. See you guys.